Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. This is part 2 of my conversation with Diana Para, a transformational coach and certified grief educator. So changing gears a little bit into kind of the other topic that you like to discover or discuss, how does identity and self-esteem play into this topic of loss and grief?
That's a big one. And I actually, when I did my my grief educator certification, that's when it kind of started to click for me, because I started to realize that, especially, I started with myself, and then I started to see that pattern in my clients, some of my clients, not all of them, where if you, let's say I'll speak for myself, my losses, my miscarriages led me to completely change the way that I saw myself as a woman. And I lost that identity of mother, right? Because in that moment, when I had the losses, it's like, okay, I want to be a mother. That's part of my identity, but I can't be, and I'm not. So then what does that mean for me? Who am I if that life that I had envisioned as a motherhood is gone? Where does that leave me now? Right. And that was part of the reason why I ended up getting, stuck, because I couldn't get out of that. I couldn't figure out, well, who am I now without, the vision that I had for myself, for my life. And, along with that was also, what does my husband think of me? Like, who am I as a woman, right? Because we're conditioned to see women believe that, we have kids and all that. And I know some women choose not to, and that's fine. But it's such a big, I feel, in our society, such a big thing to look at women as, well, women are the mothers, right? And so I felt like, well, where does that leave me now? If, am I damaged? How is my husband looking at me now as a woman, because I can't, have kids, right? So all of that kind of, became like a big burden for me. And I couldn't get past that. And we can experience that, not just, in the loss of a child, but also in the loss of, for example, the loss of a marriage, right? Who are you now that, you're not a wife, you're not married? The loss of a job, who am I now that I'm not, the company, the executive at whatever level? Who am I without that? Because we tend to believe that we are like our labels, our titles, instead of who are you really without all those things. So what was beautiful for me, and I am very grateful for the experience, is that I had to learn I had to go back and start developing a relationship with myself. Who am I? Who am I without, I'm not, without the title, of mother, wife, sister, daughter, all of those things. Who am I? And so it kind of gave me, in a weird way, it kind of gave me a clean slate. And I'm like, well, I can kind of be whomever I want to be, and so it started me on that process of exploring, who am I, and who do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? And what do I want to do?
Yes. I 100% that completely resonates with me, because early on in my journey, that was part of the process I went through. I was in a very extremely unhealthy marriage, and I couldn't ever pull the trigger. I couldn't ever file for divorce for a long, long time, because my therapist one time said, who are you if you're not a wife? And I literally didn't know the answer. I couldn't answer the question because I couldn't in my mind imagine who I was because I didn't know. And I had been in that partnership since college. And so there was never an adult me that wasn't with that person. And so it was incredibly challenging to get through that process of like reconnecting with myself. And at the same time, it was again another like kind of double loss, like, insult to injury, when my identity was priding myself on having, a quote unquote, like good family, perfect family, nuclear family, like we're together, we're, all this stuff. It didn't occur to me in my head ever in my life that I would be a divorced woman. And so the identity that I was holding in myself for a while was, well, that would mean I'm a failure. That would mean I wasn't good enough. I couldn't keep my marriage together for myself or for my kids. And there was a lot of just like layers I had to go through to kind of move through that and connect with myself, figure out who I am and how to just be in this world and be happy and be productive and be this new person that I am now. So I completely relate with like how this identity piece is so important. And the funny thing is, a lot of people, I just know that I had never thought of it consciously before. That had never occurred to me. Of course, I knew I was a wife, but I didn't know that that was like an identity. And so I think just talking about this is like bringing awareness. The whole point of the show is for me to give encouragement and support to moms. And the thing is, there's probably not a lot of things, when I heard you earlier saying the best thing you can do is to just be with someone. And that person doesn't necessarily want that bright ray of sunshine. They don't want the hope. They don't want to hear how, it's going to be good in 5 years or you'll be happy someday. Right. So I try to balance this encouragement and support piece with what I like to do versus what the reality is. And I think at that time, I know how stuck I was because all my friends kept saying, why aren't you getting divorced? Why are you staying with this person? But they didn't understand that is because it came down to my identity. That's what it really came down to is I couldn't do it because it was so foreign and unfamiliar as far as that territory. It was scarier to move forward than it was to just stay really in an unhealthy way and be stuck because at least I knew who I was then. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Cause then there's that uncertainty of like, well, who am I without all of this? Right. And at that point, you don't know because it really is about recreating yourself. Right. And I try to, I tell my clients, look at it, when they're ready, obviously look at it as like, how exciting, how exciting you get to be whoever you want to be. And you can take your time. You don't have to wake up tomorrow and be that person. You can start exploring different things, different things that you want to do, exploring yourself. And really, I recommend spending time with yourself, by yourself. Like take yourself out to dinner, take yourself out to lunch, take yourself out for a coffee, journal, write down about, how you feel and write down, what lights you up, dream, what is it that you would love to do? But going back to, the loss of identity, the thing that we don't realize, and I didn't realize it until I went through this certification process, is that there, within like that big loss, there are also like all these little losses, and we don't understand, we're not even aware that they're happening. So for example, there's the loss of the routine, right? There's the loss of the little things that, you would do with that person. There's the loss of, the way that you felt when they walked into the room, all these little losses. So it's not just one big loss, but within that, there are all these little things. There's also like the loss of, maybe you lose some friends because they're no longer coming around because they were like, that person's friend or whatever. And so there's that loss, right? So it's really, we really don't understand grief. And we think it's just this one thing, like, you lose someone and you grieve and then you're done and then you move on and then that's it, right? And it's really a very deep and complex, process. And I think it's time that we start to really educate ourselves. And I believe that we will be so much better and better able to be there for, our loved ones when they have to go through a process like that.
I think out of everything today, that was like kind of the biggest aha moment for me so far, is just the idea of all the little losses. It's all the little things, and they all add up, and it's not just the one thing, but it's all the little things along the way. That really stuck out for me. And so how, as you're coaching a client, how do you help them, move through this with kind of resilience? Because a lot of your clients are going through these transitions and these life changes, and they're, sometimes they're going from, having a baby to like moving through the process of having an empty nest. And so what is your best way to support all these changes for all these women that you coach?
Yeah, I focus on, where do you want to go? Kind of, and also if they're going through a process where the loss hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen, then I help them with what's called anticipatory grief. So you kind of you're anticipating the loss, right? So really what I focus on is their identity. Who is it that you want to be now? Who do you get to be now? And obviously along that, I provide a lot of support as they go through the grief, but it's helping them to reach like little milestones and come up with like little steps, and I keep them moving forward and celebrating every time, they take a small step. And that's really the process. It's just really being there for them, cheering them on, and helping them along the way to get really clear about what it is that they want now. Like this new life that they're creating, what does that look like? And then if you're here and that life is over here, how can you get there?
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And I remember being at such a loss with myself that one of my therapists recommended I just sit every day for like 20 minutes and just think about what it is that I want. That's the exact same process she wanted me to do, because I didn't know. I really didn't know who I was. Like I said, if I wasn't a wife, and I'm so used to kind of taking care of everybody that I had no idea how to take care of myself. I had no idea how to pursue my dreams or my visions, or even create them in the first place. Even thinking of them in the first place was a challenge, because it's like, where do you start if this is all you've ever known? How do you just then one day start to like create someone new? But I think what you're saying is it's a small process, little by little. And once you kind of figure something out, you celebrate that. That probably gives you the energy to then kind of take the next step, move on to the next thing. So can you share any stories? I mean, we're obviously, as coaches, we're confidential with our clients, but are there any stories you could share of just beautiful transformations that you've seen from some of your clients who started out in a really dark place and, came out on the other side?
Yeah. So I worked with this one client, and she went through a divorce, and she was just really stuck, kind of like similar to what you described. She didn't know who she was. She didn't have any kids, and she really didn't know like what she wanted. She was so her identity as a wife was so great that's really, that was her entire life. And adding to that the fact that the marriage ended, because there was infidelity on his part. So she was devastated, and then there was that added layer of, am I not good enough? Was I not beautiful enough? Why didn't he want to stay with me? Why did he choose somebody else? And so it was really, my work with her was really getting her to process the grief of the loss of the marriage. And then little by little, like, okay, who are you? Like, who do you want to become? And I started with having her just kind of journal, because she wasn't quite ready to, like, let's say, go out and have a, dinner by herself. So just kind of journal, like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Who do you think? Just kind of like play around with that. You don't have to say, this is definitely what I want or who I want to, be, but just kind of be playful about it, like what would be kind of cool, what would be kind of nice, and I had her like kind of build little by little, work on that. And of course, throughout the process, she would be like, okay, yeah, no, that's not really for me. That's not what I want to do. But it got her thinking about it. It got her to use her imagination. It started to get her out of that feeling of unworthiness and feeling stuck into more like the field of like possibility, And I think that's what I really love to do, is to kind of help them move into like possibility, out of the grief or the feeling stuck into like possibility. Yes, look at this. This was an ending, but it's also a beginning, right? And look at what's possible now. What you want for yourself. And I always tell them, like, you don't have to figure it out tomorrow or by the end of the week or in a month. You can take your time, because that's part of it too. And I think that's what we forget. And I think because I know I felt like that at one point, where I felt like, oh my God, I have kids, I have a husband, I have things to do. I need to figure it out like ASAP, like I don't have time to be just thinking about what I want to do or who I want to be. But actually you do, like I said, you don't have to do it all in one shot. It's just baby steps. And then as you start to figure that out, then you start taking bigger steps. And then before you know, you're like, oh, wow, like, yeah, now I have the job that I really want. Or now I moved across the country because that's where I really want to live. Yeah.
That's so neat. Okay, so one last topic, which is, how has all this experience and knowledge that you have impacted you as a mom? Because when our kids are growing up, they might not experience a big loss as a child, maybe a grandparent or something here or there, but they might experience small losses, like they didn't make the team or they didn't make the play that they wanted to. And so they experience these small little pieces of sadness and loss and grief. So how has this made you a better mom? And what have you taught your kids about this?
Oh my goodness. The first thing I'm going to say is that my relationship with them has completely, it's improved, 100%. And we have a really close relationship. My two girls, 23 and 21, they moved out in October and they share an apartment together. And it's just really neat to see how they come to me and they talk to me and they share things and they look for my, opinion, my advice sometimes. And it's really, they've gone through their own challenges, because I mentioned they're adopted. So, and they were 3, 5, and 7. So they were older. And I think also the fact that I went through through my own trauma and my own grief, and they went through their trauma, and then through the grieving process as they got older, right? Because looking back at their life and, what their losses. And so having that, I think, in common also, and for them to have watched me get myself out of, where I was and move through all of that, and now be the person that I am now, and they see me being excited and passionate about helping, other women and other people. They've actually read my book too. And, I think it's a very empowering thing for them to see what's possible, right? And I see them sometimes, especially the girls, like trying to help their friends, and giving them advice. And they'll come to me like, Mom, my friend had, this. And I told her, what you said, what you told us to blah, 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 So it's kind of really neat to see that. And really, they've learned all these tools, right? In a way, just by watching me and by the conversations we've had. But to go back to your question, like, I think we have, the relationship is so much better. And it has really helped me to understand them better and to understand really like how difficult their experience must have been. And even though they were young, what their experience of that is today, when they think back, because I can think back, on my own experience and how I felt back then and how I feel now, and I can look at it in a different way. So it's kind of neat. And I think definitely, I'm very proud of myself, of the mother that I am today. I definitely pat myself on the back. Yep. And
it makes me think that this is like your superpower. Like, this is your gift. Like, this is why you're here. This is your purpose. Because like you said, this is a topic that most people don't want to touch. They don't want to deal with it. It's too difficult for them. And so the fact that you're able to bring this out into the light and talk about it, share about it, educate people, and then be such an amazing role model for your kids. And we're going to just keep coming to you, I think, forever and ever, because, think about all the losses they will experience, a boyfriend or girlfriend, or they might have their own future loss of, something. And I hope they don't, but inevitably life happens and things will happen. And so you're just a beautiful, amazing role model, and for sharing your story. How can you, going forward, where can they go to find Diana Parra?
They can go to my website, dianaparainternational.com, or they can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Instagram is at DianaPara888.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Any last parting words for our audience?
Just to really, really remember that grief is normal. It's a part of, there will be loss in life. It's a part of living. And just to, if you find someone that's going through grief, just be there. Just be there for them. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to cheer them up. Just hold space for them.
That's perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And as always, it was wonderful to talk to you, and best wishes to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.